Welcome to Season 6 of the Directors Club podcast, exclusively for Child Care Center owners and directors. I'm Noelle Dentino, ex-corporate girl turned Child Care Center owner. I took my corporate experience, paired it with my sister's early education background to create easy-to-implement business practices that have made our center, Scribble Time, a huge raging success in our community. And now I'm here to share it all with you to help you gain back time in your day, jumpstart projects you're working on, and find and hire that next great teacher. Let's do this. Hey there, how are you today? It's Noelle. I'm glad you stopped by to listen. I'm sharing today about no gossip, no problem, strategies for creating a drama-free workplace. Doesn't that sound lovely? Gossiping can be harmful to the work environment of your child care center, as it can create a negative and toxic environment that can affect the morale and productivity of our teams. So I've come up with 6 strategies that I think a lot of people use, and you probably already know all of these, but if we could bring them all together, we can come up with a plan to address this situation, whether you have it at your center or if you don't have it, to put in place this process so that you have it covered if it ever comes up. So number 1 is establishing a clear policy. So consider establishing a policy in your handbook regarding gossiping and the consequences for engaging in this behavior. This can really help deter gossiping and create a more professional environment. I also think it's a great topic to talk about at a staff meeting, like maybe once or twice a year, when you review some of your policies, review the gossip policy, and get some feedback on it and see what they're thinking it should be. Number 2, whenever you have a situation, address the issue. As a director, it's important to take a firm stand against gossiping, clearly communicating to your staff that gossiping is not acceptable behavior at the center. Or right online outside the center, we should say. Number 3, encourage open communication. So encourage your staff to communicate openly with each other. Create an environment where staff members feel comfortable discussing their concerns and feedback with each other directly, rather than talking behind each other's backs. Now, how can you encourage this? That sounds like something that you could say, oh, I want you to be open and honest with each other. Is that shy person going to walk up to the stronger person and say, oh, let's talk about my feelings? They're probably not. So one thing you can do to encourage open communication that doesn't really have anything to do with gossip, but I believe would be a skill set that you're teaching your team that creates an environment of open communication at your center, is introducing classroom reflections to your center. So you reflect on how the classroom's going. The 2 teachers would do that, like they're reflecting on how their classroom's going, give them some guidelines on what they should reflect on, like maybe the schedule and the students and the vision and all the things in the classroom, and get that dialogue going. So if gossiping does come up, they feel more confident talking to each other about it. The 4th thing is I got to speak right. And it's the afternoon while I'm recording this. I don't even need a coffee. Number 4, model positive behavior. So as a leader, it's important to model positive behavior and avoid engaging in gossiping yourself, and always speak positively about your staff and your workplace. And I want you to take a minute right now and just pause and reflect on this. There are so many times that I have walked into certain centers to help them out, or virtually we've had conversations, and I've overheard the director making a comment about maybe a teacher still needs to work on her skill set, but like in front of other people. And that's not gossiping, but that's not positive behavior. We shouldn't be walking around sharing our assistants and our teachers and whoever else that you would be talking about, sharing about what you think their level's at or where they're not adequate in. So making sure that you model that positive behavior inside the center. The 5th thing, and super fun, at your next staff meeting, provide team building activities. Team building activities can help to build positive relationships amongst your staff, and this can reduce the likelihood of gossiping and encourage collaboration and, again, open communication. That's so important with our team. And the 6th thing, again, is about communicating. Provide opportunities for feedback. Providing regular opportunities for feedback can help to reduce gossiping because we can encourage our team to share our concerns and feedback with each other in a more constructive and respectful manner. Stopping gossiping at our centers involves creating a culture of open communication, positive behavior, and respect amongst each other. And by addressing the issues and encouraging this positive behavior, we can create more professional and productive work environments. But what do we do if it just doesn't stop? So addressing employees who violate the no gossip policy is an important step in creating positive workplace environments at the center. Here are some strategies that you can use to address these if someone violates the policy. The first thing is identify the source. So it's important to identify the source of the gossip and the individuals involved and determine the extent of the situation and how it is affecting the work environment. I always think if it's just not that a little gossip can't hurt someone's feelings versus a big one, but maybe the teacher you could coach them into addressing that they heard this gossip from somebody. They could have a conversation outside of the classroom, and maybe you could find coverage so they could have that conversation. Or do you need to get into the mix? So having a conversation with the employees involved in this situation and explain how gossiping can be harmful and that it's not acceptable behavior at the center. And emphasize the importance of open communication and encourage the employees to share their concerns directly with each other. The third thing is reinforcing the policy. So reinforce your no gossip policy and the consequences of violating it. Make it clear that this behavior will not be tolerated and there will be consequences of engaging in this. So I would add this to your staff meeting as just a review of the policy. And while we're talking about this, I want you to think about something else. I know we're in a time where it's hard to find teachers or you're afraid of turnover. But if you only have one or two people causing an issue on something, and then you sit in front of your entire team and you say, I want to remind you that we don't gossip. I've heard that there's been some gossip and this is the policy and here's the consequence. Those two people are not listening because they do not care about the gossip. They're just going to keep doing it because you just keep talking about it. And so it is good to remind everybody about the policy, but addressing it overall to a group and not addressing it to the specific people isn't going to stop it. It's going to keep it going all the time. So you have to address it one-off. It's just if you went to a staff meeting and say one teacher didn't hand in her curriculum every month and like driving you nuts and everyone else does, and then coming in hard at the staff meeting about how curriculum's due and it needs to be handed in a certain time, everyone else is sitting there listening to that thinking like, who's not handing it in? Or it doesn't send the right message when you address a group for one person's concern. So moving on, number 4, provide support. Offer support to the employees who have been affected by the gossiping. So just providing them a time for them to share their concerns and offer some solutions, because sometimes it can get overwhelming from their perspective if they're hearing about themselves getting talked about in a poor way. The 5th thing is super duper important, and super duper means it's really important, is document the conversation. Document every single conversation you have with employees, especially when it has to do with violation of company policies. And always document the action steps taken to address the gossiping. I also like them to sign off on something, so it serves as like a record of the issue and the steps that I take, and it goes in the file. Now, there have been employees that won't sign it, which is fine. Then I just write in front of them. She and Jen refused to sign this document. I met with her from 1 o'clock to 1:30 p.m. on March 2nd, and I'm putting this in her file. Call it a day. If she doesn't want to sign it, she doesn't have to. I've also seen documentation where it said, I may not agree with the information provided to me, but I was present at this meeting, if that you want to have them sign something like that. And if they don't want to sign it, like I said, sign it yourself and let them, and just document they refused. And that's not, can't force somebody, I guess, to sign something, but just it protects you. Number 6 is monitor the situation. So just making sure that it doesn't continue and that you're following up with it, and it lets your team know that you're being proactive with it, which I think is half the battle, right? They want to know that they have a voice with you and that you're hearing them with what they're saying. Addressing employees who violate the no gossip policy involves having the conversation like we just talked about, reinforcing the policy, and offering support. And when we take swift and decisive action, we can create a workplace environment that is positive and respectful and professional. But we all know that we're going to have a teacher that's going to continue to engage in gossiping despite previous conversations and any attempt that you've made to address the issue. It may be time to consider termination at that point. Gossiping creates a negative and toxic work environment, which can affect the morale and productivity of your staff. It can also impact the reputation of your childcare center and potentially harm relationships with families. And by terminating an employee, it's important to have, again, clear documentation, including any conversation and action steps that you've had to address this. I also think it's super important that you give the employee a clear warning that the behavior must stop, along with a specific time frame that you're looking for improvement. Or it's important to be clear about the consequences of continued gossiping, including the possibility of termination. I think that is super important in anything that you give them, that this can lead to termination if it continues. If the employee continues to engage in gossiping despite these warnings and all the opportunities that you've given them for improvement, termination may be necessary. However, it's important to ensure that you're always in compliance with any state laws that you have, anything with EC or the state that you have, to handle the situation with sensitivity and respect. Terminating an employee should be the last effort. An effort should be made to address the issues and provide opportunities for improvement. However, if the behavior continues despite all these efforts, it is sometimes necessary to do this. I know these decisions are so hard to make, and this is why it's so important to have a policy and follow it with your team, especially the documentation. When we let things go, it allows the gossip to take over. And I want you to think of this too, because I have been in this situation. Don't fear it if every parent's favorite teacher is the one, and everyone loves her, but behind the scenes she's toxic. I promise you that I have had teachers that the parents absolutely adore who have been the most toxic and vile people behind the scenes, and they've had to leave because of this, or I've attempted so many times. It is very difficult to get fired at scribble time. Very difficult. But it does happen. So you may likely hear, and this has happened many times, where it eats us up inside when we have to terminate somebody. We've had to let people go. The past 18 years, there's been a few, and you feel bad doing it. You feel bad, and you're trying to help, and you're trying to give this person every opportunity, and the parents just love them. And then they leave, and you're going to deal with parents complaining, why did they leave? All the things. And you're going to hear things probably over the next 12 months after she leaves that reinforce your good decision in terminating that person. So I know it's hard to do that, but I think it's important. So given the hiring situation that we're all in, if you are in this situation right now, I would put an ad out and just see what's out there. If you have ads going and they're not working, maybe stop them for a little bit and then restart it in a couple weeks and put another ad out and see what's out there. And maybe you can, hire somebody. And if you have all your documentation in a row to terminate somebody, then maybe you can move forward after the person shows up and you know that they're staying. That's so important. The one other thing I'll say, if you've never had to do this before, is that if you're feeling nervous and you're just feeling so anxious about this situation, that's all a good thing, because that just shows you are empathetic. And when you think to yourself as a leader, I'm just going to fire everybody and fire this person, fire that person. When we have that mentality, that's not a great leader. But when we can feel that empathetic, even for the person that's breaking the rules all the time, that you're having to waste your time even talking about the gossip. But when we feel like that, it shows you're empathetic, and to me, it shows you're coming from the right place, because you know that this is not an acceptable behavior to have at your child care center. You don't want to work in that environment. You don't want the kids to be in that environment. And I'm going to tell you, if the teachers are hearing the gossip, I guarantee you the kids hear it too. So I hope that you learned something from this today, and maybe it encouraged you to reinforce your gossip policy, or if you don't have one, put one in. Put a no gossip policy in, and what the consequences are to deter it from your child care center. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you learned something. And if you need anything from us, send us a message. If you have time, I would appreciate you heading to the show notes and rating our show and letting us know how we're doing. We also have some links at the bottom of the show to get to all of our social media accounts, like our Directors Club, our brand new Teachers Lounge. If you haven't heard of that, head to the show notes and click on the website. You are not going to want to miss that.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode.
My friend. I'm
If you know another director who may benefit from listening, please share the link to my podcast. I love connecting with directors and sharing business tips and tools to make your life easier. The show notes below have all the links I talked about in the podcast, along with my social media connections. I'd love you to tell me how I'm doing by rating the show or leaving a comment. Hope you have a great week, and I'm cheering you on.